Residents in Diepsloot, north of Johannesburg, have been protesting in recent days over crime and poor policing, as well as what they say is illegal immigration, which is out of control in the area. Now, factors that have come out strongly from engagements with community members and police officers is that poor urban planning is affecting accessibility for officers who are charged basically with keeping people in Diepsloot safe. Speaking to the media last week after violence in Diepsloot flared up, Police Minister Siphelele said that the fight against crime in that area is made more difficult because of narrow streets and the large size of the population in a small area. Let's talk further about Diepsloot and the environmental planning and how that affects the response to crime. We can speak this afternoon to Siphelele Ngobese, who's a researcher in the Inclusive Cities program at SA Cities Network. Siphelele, very good afternoon to you. Welcome to the program. So are townships such as Diepsloot, the more densely populated ones, especially with informal settlements almost one on top of the other, are they a designed grooming place, shall we say, for crime, especially for crime to flourish?
I think that's a great and useful assessment, Thembekile, and thank you for having me. Definitely the spatial plan, and we advance quite a lot, and it's backed by evidence. The thinking that the things that enable or disable crime or the propensity for crime to happen are spatial, are economic, and are also social. So space is a critical one to whether or not a place gives itself to crime to thrive. And so very dense formations, I think also coupled with the economics. And so a dearth of opportunities for economic involvement, participation, come together to kind of create a cocktail for crime and violence to thrive.
It also ties into South Africa's question of landlessness, doesn't it? Because you've got a lot of people who are coming from different provinces, as we're learning in Diepsloot, other SADC countries as well, who then come to this country or come to Gauteng itself, and because they cannot afford the available options in the better serviced areas, erect shacks, and then they're close together, but the area is not safe precisely because of the spatial planning element. Who then now needs to step in to fix that, and can it be addressed almost instantly?
Whether it can be addressed instantly, Thembekile, I'm not so sure. However, it's a range of inputs. As you said, it's a spatial problem, meaning that, it's our local governments, our municipalities who are the custodians of space and therefore have a role in reconfiguring the spatial pattern, or, we hear a lot in policy language, it referred to as the spatial legacy of apartheid, where our places were designed to kind of keep certain people in and others out. And so it's manifested in the dynamics that we see today. However, local governments in our municipalities are the custodians of space, and therefore there is their role. There is also a role for national actors in terms of the people who make the policies, the people who craft what is then to happen at the local level. There is an input in terms of the management of migration, and I'm not just talking about cross-border migration, but also internal migration, because it's a function of both. It's a function of migration that is not managed adequately enough. So when we do our research into the key drivers of violence and crime, we find that different areas are affected by different dynamics altogether. So, for example, if you had to look at a city like Nelson Mandela Bay or a city like Cape Town, one of the key drivers there is access to illicit arms, possibly as a result of, the prevalence of gangs there. However, in cities like Johannesburg, who receive a lot of in-migration, some of the key drivers of violence and crime in those particular cities are what we call migration factors. And so what we call migration factors, there's no distinction, I must emphasize, between internal migration and cross-border migration. I think it's broadly a matter of better management of migration and the factors that then manifest at the level at which life is lived and within communities as well.
And where are you, as you assess the countrywide look, right? We talk a lot about Diepsloot because that's where the story is currently. But you've also referenced the situation in the Western Cape. Where are you seeing the sort of worst effects of spatial planning and the link to crime, which basically makes it difficult for police to get a handle on the situation?
Mm-hmm. I think I want to go back to what I said in the beginning to say that the drivers of crime are economic, are spatial, and are also social. And so when you look at, so it would be anywhere in the country really where crime and violence are directly driven by space, because I think what we call the spatial legacy of apartheid, the economic legacy of apartheid, is felt across the country. And so these dynamics manifest in different places in different ways. So I spoke to, the drivers in a city like Cape Town, often linked to illicit firearms, also alcohol and substance use. And those are, manifestations of how our society is configured in such a way that a lot of our people are locked into spaces where there is inadequate access to transport. Transport doesn't integrate well with human settlements. People are far from opportunities. The average commute times are 40 minutes to an hour. People spend about 40% of their incomes on transport. And so economic opportunities are not close enough. Economic opportunities are fewer and far between the more time goes. And so these are the legacies. These are the spatial, economic, and social legacies that drive crime and violence. And we like to emphasize the effects of all those dynamics on the even more vulnerable groups. On women, on children, and so on. And I think even Diepsloot is microcosmic of these.
And we often speakers are saying about the legacy of apartheid spatial planning, where basically townships were used as part of the oppression of black people and as a dumping ground to keep them furthest away from resources and everything else as possible, right? When you look at new informal settlements and townships in democratic South Africa, how much better has this government fared in terms of making sure that those are in fact decent places, safe places to live?
In terms of how our new government has fared, I would say that, the new informal settlements are continued expressions of the kinds of cities that our people would love to see. It is people taking it upon themselves to put themselves closer to where opportunities are. And I must say that, the broad assessment is that transforming South African space, transforming our economies has not moved at as fast a pace as people's needs are. And people's needs to be included in society, to have economic opportunity and access is something of that is now. And so those speak for themselves as expressions of the kinds of development that our people would like to see. And so where you see informal settlements coming up is directly proportional to where people think opportunities are, and it's an expression, and we like to talk in our professional space about bringing opportunities closer to people, bringing people from the peripheries of cities closer to city cores where opportunities continue to be concentrated, and also taking opportunities to where cities are. So we talk about the compacting of cities. And in my view, in my professional view rather, I think where we see informal settlements coming up is an expression of the kind of transformation, of the kind of reconfiguration of space that is direly needed happening, and people taking it upon themselves where they feel that the state hasn't moved fast enough to include them.